Hello and welcome. My name is Andrew. I work in the RET Liability and EDI section at the Clean Energy Regulator, and I will be presenting this webinar for EDI participants on how to apply to amend exemption certificates and related processes. Assisting me with Q&As today is John and Prue from the team. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and community. I pay my respects to them and their cultures, and to elders both past and present. I will pause for questions during the presentation. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be published to the CER website in the coming weeks. Thank you for participating. Start off with what we covered on this webinar: where to find applications, the timeframes, when to apply for liable entity change, am I changing retailer in the application year, will I be in contract with multiple liable entities for the application year, and finally, do I need to notify the regulator? Where to find the applications? From the front page, after logging on the client portal, follow the Renewable Energy Target link. On the Renewable Energy Target link, scroll down to the available forms as per the slide. I've highlighted the two that we'll speak about today. Timeframes, when to apply for liable entity change. This slide provides a snapshot of key points in the exemption application process. You will note the deadline of the 31st of December highlighted in yellow. This is the deadline for change for liable entity applications. Please note, participants are unable to access applications to change liable entity or to change multiple liable entities prior to the initial application being approved and the first exemption certificate being issued. Once the initial exemption certificate is issued, participants with multiple concurrent liable entities or need to change their liable entity in the application year must submit a change of liable entity form accompanied by the new electricity contract via the client portal, again by no later than the 31st of December of the application year. Am I changing retailer in the application year? It's under Regulation 22LA. For the first of the change application types, I will talk to you the change liable entity. This application falls under Regulation 22LA. Prescribed persons who commence an application year with one retailer and change to another retailer at some point need to apply to the regulator to formally change the listed liable entity. Applying under Regulation 22LA will result in two exemption certificates produced. The initial certificate is amended to a B version, and the second certificate relating to the new retailer will be a new version 2 of the certificate. This process allows a prescribed person to exchange relevant certificates with retailers in line with contracted supply coverage for the application year. Participants to supply as part of the application specify the circumstances why the old retailer ceased to be the retailer. In this case, the contract period has ended with one retailer and a new contract with a new retailer has commenced. The contract detailing the start of the new retailer, evidence that the old and new retailers have been advised of the application. If the use amount formula has changed materially from the old retailer, an explanation of the change is required. This may mean a new audit report will be required in the instances where the exemption is likely to exceed 15,000 megawatt hour threshold. When selecting your new retailer and is not in the list, please contact us. That brings us to our first period of stop for questions. I will now pause briefly to allow you time for you to submit questions. You can type your questions into the live event Q&A feature now. If you don't wish to raise a question in this forum, you can email us later at inquiries@cleanenergyregulator.gov.au. Send over now to John or Prue just to highlight any questions that may come in.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. At this stage, there haven't been any questions come through. I don't know if you want to pause for a little half a minute just to see if anything comes through. Otherwise, we can always raise them at your next pause if you want.
One point I'd like to probably raise at this point, where I've made the statement that if the formula changes materially between the first and the second retailer for whatever reason, and if you're over 15,000 megawatt hour threshold, you do have the opportunity to petition to the regulator to seek a determination that a new audit report is not required. That'll be on a case-by-case basis and addressed that way.
While you were talking there, Andrew, a couple of questions came in. I think you've addressed the first one, which was the question of what was the 15,000 megawatt hour threshold about again. I think you've just covered that again, but let me read the other question and hand over back to you. What if we enter into a new contract with the same liable entity?
In that case, there's no need to submit a change liable entity, because essentially if you're retaining the same retailer, then what we're talking about here when doing a change application is to change the listed retailer on the exemption certificate, and if that remains the same retailer, it's just a new contract with incumbent, then there's no need to complete a change.
Okay. Apart from a question about having some IT or audio problems, which I think is Prue dealing with, there are no further questions here, Andrew.
Okay. So move on. Will I be in contract with multiple liable entities for the application year? It's under Regulation 22MA. The second of the change application types I will talk to is change multiple liable entity. This application falls under Regulation 22MA. Prescribed persons in the application year enter into contracts for supply with two or more retailers need to apply to the regulator to formally change the listed liable entity to multiple retailers. Applying under Regulation 22MA will result in an exemption certificate being produced for each listed retailer. The initial certificate is amended to a B version, and subsequent certificate related to the concurrent retailers will be new versions 2 and 3 and so on. This process allows the prescribed person to exchange relevant certificates with retailers in line with contracted supply coverage for the application year. Along with the application, the participant to supply as part of the application, supply how the electricity will be consumed and the amount of relevant acquisition expected in relation to each retailer. The contract detailing start of the new retailer, evidence of the new and old retailers have been advised the application if that is the case. If the use amount formula has changed materially from the old retailer, an explanation of the change is required. This may mean a new audit report will be required in the instances where exemption is likely to exceed 15,000 megawatt threshold. And again, as I was saying before, if there may be subtle changes to the use amount formula, taking into account the multiple liable entity arrangements. Again, that there is scope for the participant to seek a determination from the regulator that an audit report will not be required. And again, that's on a case-by-case basis. And again, to finish this slide off, when selecting your new retailer and it's not in the list, please contact us. I'll go back to question time. I'll now pause briefly to allow time for you to submit your questions. You can type in your questions into the live event Q&A feature now. If you don't wish to raise a question in this forum, you can email us later at inquiries@cleanenergyregulator.gov.au.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. At this stage, doesn't seem to be any questions coming through.
Just give that another 25, 30 seconds. Is anyone a chance to get something in?
Yes, you're obviously doing a fine job. I think you've answered all their questions. So, yeah, I'll let you know if any come through in the next 15, 20 seconds or so. Yes, Andrew, no further
Nothing
questions
further?
here.
Let's move on. Do I need to notify the regulator? It is important to ensure that regulator is kept informed when, if circumstances arise at a site. This can be done by raising a notify the regulator notification via the client portal. There are a number of specific instances where notifying the regulator would be appropriate. Having said that, when in doubt, notify the regulator. Some situations that reply, or does your situation fall into one of the following categories? There's been a significant increase or decrease in activity or infrastructure at the site. Any business has been sold. Activity ceases at the site. An inaccuracy in the exemption certificate is discovered. If for any reason the list of primary contact needs to change, or for any other reason that has not been mentioned, again, and I'll just refer back to my earlier comment that when in doubt, notify the regulator. Just if it turns out that it's an issue that doesn't require any further action, then it's better to have those issues raised and put to the side rather than not knowing about them. One more time, I'll stop with questions. So I'll pause briefly. And again, if you don't wish to raise a question in the forum, you can email us later at inquiries@cleanenergyregulator.gov.au. I'll just pause for a little while there, John, just to give people an opportunity to type in questions if they need to.
Yeah, sure. I've got no questions at this stage, but let's just see if any come through, given the delay that we know we get on the broadcast.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that that you're all good to go there, Andrew. No more questions have come through.
Excellent. We'll move on just to finish up now. So this concludes today's webinar. For more information, please contact us by calling 1300 553 542 or email us at inquiries@cleanenergyregulator.gov.au or visit the website at www.cleanenergyregulator.gov.au. Thank you for your time and participation.